Right, members, if we can have some quiet, please, we will get on with tonight's meeting. Good evening to you all, and welcome to this meeting of Full Council. I'm Councillor Andrew Hensman, Chairman of the Council, and I will be chairing the meeting this evening. I'd like to welcome all those in attendance this evening. There's no hybrid, you won't notice, so we're all here who needs to be. This meeting is being webcasted and will be broadcast by the Council's YouTube channel. If members wish to speak this evening, please can you indicate by clearly raising your hand. For your safety and those around you, members are requested to please remain seated when speaking on any item under consideration this evening. This meeting is scheduled for 3 hours, and I would be grateful if everyone could ensure that they keep their speeches concise and to the issue being considered. We are not expecting a fire alarm. However, in the event of an alarm, please leave via the fire exits over there and over there, and assemble in the car park away from the building. Can I also remind everyone to ensure they have their mobile phone switched to silent? And we'll proceed to the first item of business, agenda item 1, apologies for absence. I have received apologies for absence from the following councillors: Councillor Bill Rose, Councillor Mrs Wendy Schmidt, Councillor Mrs Gabrielle Spray, Councillor Andy Munday, Councillor Mrs Angela Kilmartin, Councillor Paul Thorogood, Councillor Miss Michelle Weeks, and Councillor Unsworth, who may appear. Are there any further apologies to note? No. Thank you, members. So we'll proceed to agenda item number 2 for declarations of interest. Do members have any disclosable pecuniary interest, other pecuniary interest, or non-pecuniary interest that they wish to declare this evening? If so, can you please state the item and the nature of your interest? Councillor Pell.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. It's a PI in item 6. My husband worked for the industry and receives his pension from them.
Thank you, Mrs Pell. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, 2 interests under 6, an NPI as the proposed route of the National Grid power lines passes potentially close to where I live. I've taken advice, and so long as I don't speak during any discussion specifically about that, I've been told I can take part. And then on item 7, I'm going to mention during the motion on the Platinum Jubilee the things that Rivenall Parish Council did in pursuit of that, and I'm a member of Rivenall Parish Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. There was one more. Councillor Wright.
Yeah, under the report to Council, I'm going to mention Rivenall Parish Council, and I'm a member of the Deputy Chair of Rivenall Parish Council.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Anyone else? No. Thank you, members. We'll proceed to agenda item number 3, which is the minutes of the previous meeting. Please can I have a proposer to approve the minutes as an accurate record of the annual general meeting of Full Council held on the 25th of April 2022.
Chairman, I believe there's a couple of errors. Okay. I think they're typos. At the last line of minute 10, there's some numbers.
We'll get it.
Numbers there. I don't know if they're supposed to be there.
Okay, thank you very much.
And then the second line of minute 13 should say 22-23.
Lovely, thank you very
Well
much.
spotted. Hold on. Any others? Give Mrs Wilson a chance to take a seat. Right, so with those amendments, are members happy to propose the minutes? That's correct? Okay, thank you. And all those in favour with those amendments? That's unanimous. Thank you, members. So I'll now sign the minutes. Thank you, members. So we'll now proceed to agenda item 4, which is public question time. Members, we have 3 registered speakers for this evening's meeting. Registered speakers each have 3 minutes each to make their statements or ask a question. A warning bell will be sounded at the expiry of the 3 minutes, and the registered speaker must cease speaking at that time if not already done so. So the first speaker we have is Mr. Alan Mackenzie. You wish to ask a question in relation to Essex County Council's position regarding the airfield proposal. Please come forward to the speaker's table and you have 3 minutes to ask your question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Can you turn your microphone on, please? Yeah. I guess you've got 2 green lights. Not yet.
That's ready.
Well, in fact, it's given me an opportunity, Mr. Chairman. Could I extend a welcome on behalf of the public to you in your new position as chair, first of all? Whilst I'm able to do that as well, could I extend you an invite as well, and to the rest of the councillors here, because hopefully you've already received it via your emails, but the Stop Wethersfield Airfield Prisons campaign is holding an information event, an evening at Wethersfield Village Hall on the 3rd of July between 4 p.m. and 7 p.m. And there'll be speakers there from SWAP and from the Wethersfield Air Base Scrutiny Committee. And there'll be an opportunity for all councillors to engage with the community to find out a bit more about progress that's been made by both SWAP and WASC. I do hope that you'll all find an opportunity to attend if you can. Thank you very much. My question, as you say, is related to Essex County Council. And did councillors note the excellent letter from Essex County Council to the Ministry of Justice dated 8th of November 2021 about Wethersfield Airfield? In it, ECC said, the site is located in rural Braintree, surrounded by primarily hamlets and small groups of homes where development is normally restricted to countryside uses. The settlement hierarchy is characterised by minimal day-to-day services and facilities with poor public transport links, meaning sustainable development is unlikely to be met. Amongst some quite damning comments on heritage, ECC summed up its position by saying, at present, it is unlikely the scheme could be supported from a heritage perspective should it progress to an application. Then on housing, ECC commented that these rural villages do not provide new housing opportunities at scale or the provision of affordable homes based on the average salaries of prison officers, probation officers and prison instructor roles. Consequently, a significant number of employees are likely to seek accommodation in the larger settlements of Braintree and or surrounding towns, placing pressure on services therein and travelling longer distances to work, primarily by car, placing additional pressure on the rural network. We all know that traffic assessments show there will be more than a doubling of journeys on the local roads, with much of the additional traffic being heavier goods vehicles. In relation to health services, ECC noted that any new prison will need to demonstrate its potential impact on the provision of local health services, which are already under pressure. Then it said, if the 2 prisons are progressed, it will be necessary to ensure resources to assess and provide social care needs are enhanced locally, as the increase in demand arising from some 3,500 prisoners is likely to be significant. It goes on in this vein. Councillors should really read it if they have not already. Does the council concur with the views of the county council? I would hope you'll say you do. But even if you do, I don't think the Ministry of Justice really gives much care to what councillors think. I'll be finished in just 1 second. Because if the council rejects an application, as Chorley Council did, as Buckinghamshire Council has, and has Harborough Council, they'll probably find that the MOJ ignores this council's views too, as the MOJ seems to be doing in each of those cases by saying they intend to appeal. So, given that, isn't it a good opportunity for every councillor to come out to express their opinion on one of the largest proposed developments in the whole country, and certainly the most inappropriately cited proposal in the whole country? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mackenzie. And if you wish the chairman to come to any event, then search on the braintree.gov.uk website and search for invite the chairman, and there is a form on there which you can put the details into, and I will certainly consider it.
Correct, we will do.
Thank you. Please can you return to the public seating? And Mr. Clark Holland, you wish to ask a question in relation to the prison proposal? Please come forward to the speaker's table. And you have 3 minutes to ask your question.
Am I on? I'm good.
You are on, yes.
Good evening, everyone. I've written it down so I don't get tongue-tied. But just before I'm sort of positioning my question, as a local resident, it's the only chance I get to talk to the local councillors and sort of give my feelings and my hopes and whatever as the people that have been elected to represent me and my views. So even though my question is quite personal to Councillor Butland, I don't know where Councillor Butland is, sorry, it really isn't personal. I'd really like everyone to listen to the question, because what's contained within it is crucial really to what we're trying to achieve, which is I wake up every day and think, I hope that the councillors truly listen to what just local people are saying, what we feel about this and this beautiful rural area, and will hopefully come forward and sort of say, actually, we do support local people, what we're trying to do here, and please, MOJ, have a think about, not from the heart, but from the head as well, with the information that's coming out and how inappropriate it is. Which brings me on to my question, which is SWAP recently wrote to Dominic Raab, James Cleverly, Victoria Atkins, and other personnel at the Ministry of Justice and Councillor Butland to request they ask for an independent review of the Ministry of Justice's consultants' assessments. James Cleverly has written back to say that he has contacted the MOJ and highlighted our detailed concerns and request for an independent review. Of course, everyone knows the road network around the airfield is a considerable, if not impossible, obstacle to any significant development. And the government has been investigating this site since 2016. So it would have thought that it would have given them time to actually delay a possible planning application due to the requirement for pollution monitoring to be undertaken. The MOJ would have had time to consider the information from the assessments already undertaken, rather than continue to commit to consultants' exercises, which basically the consultants are going to continue to do as long as they get paid. So my question is, has Councillor Butland made the request to the MOJ, as James Cleverly has already, to have an independent review of their assessments now, and hopefully bring this terrible process to a halt sooner rather than later? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Clark Holland.
You're welcome.
Please can you return to the public seating? And Mr. Easton, you wish to ask a question in relation to the prison proposal?
I do. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. You have 3 minutes to ask your question.
Thank you. The Council will have noted that the parliamentary petition against the Wethersfield prison proposals received more than 10,000 signatures. The government therefore had to respond to the petition and did so last Thursday. The response concentrated on the ecology of the site and the mitigation the Ministry of Justice says it will put in place for the great crested newts, birds on the red list, bats, other species. It is difficult, I think, to believe that it would be possible to mitigate the effects of 14 concrete structures wholly lacking architectural merit, 17.5 metres high, within a site perimeter of 3 miles. I'm getting to the point. Does the Council agree that the best way to protect the environment of rural North Braintree and ecology of the airfield site is not to build a huge development there, but to listen to the wishes and needs of residents and Essex County Council, which believes there is a lack of green infrastructure in the area, to which the airfield site could contribute significantly? That's it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Easton. if you'd like to return to the public seating. So I'd like to invite Councillor Butland to respond to the questions, and please can I remind the speakers they have no right of reply. Councillor Butland.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you to the three speakers. I'll just deal with the factual situation. As far as Essex County Council is concerned, the response was from the Head of Planning and Sustainable Development as part of the pre-application process. No member of Essex County Council has been involved in considering the issue, and as the letter concludes, there is an opportunity for the MOJ, should they wish to discuss the matter further, to discuss it. Although I wholeheartedly agree, and I am on record of saying several years ago, that actually the highways, I think, is a major issue, and I think that is confirmed in this letter. Mr. Clark-Holland, on your point, first of all, sorry you haven't attended any of the parish council meetings that I attend on a regular basis each month. I don't know which parish you are in, but if you're in Three Fields, I attend all of them, and please feel free to, contact me at any time there. No, I haven't made any representations as such, because this council at the moment has not made a decision, because one, no planning application has been submitted. As and when a planning application is submitted, it will be for this council to deal with it in such a way that it doesn't lose the opportunity to determine the application. In other words, that we are seen to be clean and that members of the planning committee do not prejudge. However, those of us who are not on the planning committee will be in a position to make our views clear as and when we know what we are responding to, when we have the detail of a planning application. And the final speaker, Mr. Rees, I think I may have answered your question. Sorry, Chairman. I know you raised the thing about the petition, which I've seen, and the responses from the government. Clearly, those are genuine issues, which, if a planning application is submitted, will need to be considered by our planning officers and then advising our planning committee to make a decision. But there is, so hopefully that's covered the main 3 points of that. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Butland. Members, the reply by Councillor Butland concludes this evening's public question time session. Can I thank all the speakers once again for their questions? You're all welcome to remain and watch the meeting. Alternative, you may leave if you wish and see us online at some point. I'll just give them a moment to vacate. So we'll move on to agenda item 5, announcements and statements from the Chairman and the Leader of the Council. So my announcements: since my election at the AGM in April, I'm pleased to announce that I have attended a total of, I believe, 21 engagements so far. And it was great to start my civic year with the Queen's Jubilee on the agenda, and I was delighted to attend various events to celebrate. So I attended a service at Chelmsford Cathedral, dementia-friendly afternoon tea at Braintree Town Hall, Halstead Town Council's Jubilee event, and don't you know how to party, Halstead? Very, very well attended, absolutely packed, and delighted to have been invited over there, ended up over there every day. So, you had your concert at St Andrew's Church, and I also managed to get down to Great Notley's Fete. I've also visited each of the commemorative benches in Braintree, Halstead and Witham, and I was honoured to light the beacon in Gosfield. So there's a lot of events that I'm not going to go all the way through, from Speakers Trust to Windmill to Hatfield Peverils Beyond the Bricks. That was one of my very first, and including raising the flag today. Finally, I also have the pleasure of saying a huge congratulations to Adrian Corder-Birch and Councillor Robert Knott at Little Yeldon, Tilbury, Juxtaclare and Ovington Parish Council, who are both celebrating an incredible 50 years of service as parish clerk and 60 years as parish councillor, respectively. This is a wonderful achievement, and I have no doubt that during their service they've each worked tirelessly for their communities, and I will have the honour of personally delivering a certificate to them shortly, to which I believe the Vice Chairman and the Ward Councillor will be joining me. So I'd like to invite Councillor Graham Butland, Leader of the Council, to make any announcements. Councillor Butland.
Thank you, Chairman. I will make two announcements, one regarding the local plan and one regarding the Levelling Up white paper of the government and where we are within Essex. If I can start with the local plan, Chairman. Members will be aware of the news that we received last week regarding the local plan, but to put it on our agenda as such, and also for members of the public, I'm pleased to say that Braintree District Council has now received the final planning inspector's report to section 2 of our local plan, which says the plan can be found legally sound. The planning inspector's final report, because there were two of them, final report concludes that the document can be adopted, subject to including modifications. The final list of main modifications which accompanies the inspector's report is available on our website, but remains largely unchanged from those that were consulted upon back in January of this year. The local plan is an important document as it is the master plan for future development of the district, setting out where new housing developments will be built or can be built, and the infrastructure and facilities that accompany them over the next 11 years. It also helps us to fight against speculative housing developments when determining planning applications. Local plans are often a long and difficult process, and this plan has been no exception to that. So this is a significant milestone for us, which means we can now move ahead with the formal adoption of the whole plan. The plan will now go through our normal processes for Council's consideration at the Council's upcoming local plan subcommittee, and if approved, will be recommended to full Council in July for formal adoption. I want to use this opportunity to thank all residents who contributed to the process and to those who took time to provide their comments of whatever persuasion in the public consultation and for helping us to prepare this local plan. So there will be an opportunity, Chairman, at our next meeting in July, subject to the local plan committee agreeing to make a proposal to full council, where we will formally adopt that plan. The second point I wish to discuss is the government white paper on levelling up and devolution. This has been considered by Essex leaders, the County Council, the two unitary authorities and the 12 districts, boroughs and cities now in Essex. It's been agreed that a joint letter would be written by the three upper tier authority leaders and also Councillor Neil Stock of Tendring, who chairs the meeting of the council leaders, would write to Neil O'Brien and also seek a meeting. A meeting has now taken place between the leaders of the three upper tier authorities at Southend, Thurrock and Essex County Council. That meeting took place last week, at which all three leaders expressed the view that we would wish to enter into discussions in due course with the government on what may or may not be on offer by way of a devolution deal for Essex. It was also agreed by the leaders that it was important that all members of all authorities should be kept fully up to date with what was going on, and an agreed set of briefing papers will be forwarded to all members of all councils, the same set, so everybody's getting the same case, and I hope to get this out to all of our members during the course of this week. And there is a members' evening arranged for July, in which I'd like to spend some of that time at least with an opportunity for discussion on that. So that's just to say, things are progressing. There is to be 3 working groups established, chaired by each of the 3 upper tier authorities, but also with leaders of the second-tier authorities, ourselves, the districts, boroughs and cities, looking at particular aspects of the white paper with a view to reaching some consensus on what are the issues, the freedoms that we would like to try and obtain from government as part of any devolution deal. So I think the important thing is, and I think it's the correct way, that we're actually starting with what do we actually want to do before we dive into and what's the best structures for doing it. So that work will proceed over the next couple of months, and I undertake, Chairman, to make sure that Braintree councillors are the best informed of what is going on in the county. That's my two statements, Chairman.
As you always do, Councillor Button. Thank you for that. So we will now proceed to agenda item number 6, which is a motion by Councillor Mrs Iona Parker. And this is on the National Grid and sustainable energy generation. Members, following the publication of this report as set out in pages 6 and 7 of the agenda, an amendment to the published motion was received in accordance with the Council Procedure Rules. Councillor Mrs Parker and Councillor Wrench, as the proposer and seconder respectively of the original motion, were consulted and have consented to the amendment. As a consequence of this acceptance, the amended motion is now the substantive motion to be considered this evening. Members, please can I remind you that an addendum report setting out the amended motion was published and circulated to all members on Friday the 17th of June. We will be referring to the addendum report for the debate. As Councillor Mrs Parker and Councillor Wrench, the proposer and seconder of the motion, are present, this item may proceed. Councillor Mrs Parker, please can you formally move the motion, and please can I remind you that before you make your speech on the motion, it must be seconded.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'd like to formally move the amended motion at agenda item 6, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wrench, you are recorded as the seconder of the motion. Please confirm that you second this motion, and do you wish to speak after Councillor Mrs Parker's speech or reserve your right?
Thank you, Chairman. I can confirm that I do second this motion, and I'd like to reserve my right to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wrench. Members, the motion has been formally moved and seconded by Councillor Mrs Parker and Councillor Wrench. So I'll now invite Councillor Mrs Parker to make her speech.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Members, the motion before you relates to the proposal by National Grid to build a new line of pylons up to 50 metres high from Norwich to Tilbury via Bramford near Ipswich, a distance of some 180 kilometres. The project is known as East Anglia Green, and the non-statutory consultation, as I'm sure you're all aware, has just finished. In putting forward this motion, I acknowledge that the means of generating electricity in the UK has changed. In the 1960s, most electricity was generated in coal-fired power stations in the Midlands and the north of England, Scotland and Wales, and the electricity transmission network was designed to transmit electricity from there to the major population centres around the UK. Now, most electricity is generated in gas-fired and nuclear power stations, many are on the coast, with an increasing amount generated by offshore wind farms, including those in the North Sea. Electricity is also imported from abroad through interconnector cables, so it's a very different picture from the 1960s. The East Anglia Green proposal is to transmit electricity from offshore wind farms in the North Sea from Norwich to Tilbury via Bramford using an overhead line, where it will join the network which serves London. The proposal will see, as I understand it, around 150 50-metre high steel pylons erected across a swathe of unspoilt and rural landscape in East Anglia, including parts of our own district. This will undoubtedly cause considerable harm to the visual appearance of the landscape and adversely affect properties on the route. I note from reading the East Anglia Green website that the main consideration in choosing an overland route was to reduce cost to the end consumer. This is an important consideration, but in my opinion really should not be the only one. Cost cannot be measured purely in financial terms, and as is increasingly being acknowledged, beauty and the natural environment are valuable in their own right, and should be taken into account in assessing options. I would urge National Grid and the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy to consider all options and to take into account environmental impact as well as cost. I note that a high voltage direct current cable is proposed between Suffolk and Kent and between South East Scotland and South Humber, which will be on a subsea cable. So a subsea cable around the coast of East Anglia is technically possible. This would be able to serve all offshore and coastal generation, including offshore wind, interconnectors and nuclear power stations. For all options for transmitting energy from the offshore wind farms, I really urge National Grid to take all steps to mitigate any negative environmental impacts. Finally, members, I believe it's of utmost importance that stakeholders and residents are able to have their say on the means by which electricity from offshore wind farms is transmitted. I'm particularly concerned there's been no engagement so far on alternative options, including a subsea route, which seem to have been discounted by National Grid without any reference to the public at all. National Grid must make sure that local communities are consulted on all options and not presented with a fait accompli. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs. Parker. Members, we now move to the debate on this motion. Please can I remind members that they may only speak once on this motion. Speeches should relate strictly to the motion under discussion and may be necessary for the progression of the debate or to a point of order relating to procedure. I will curtail excessive speeches or where the speech no longer addresses the motion. Do any members wish to speak on this motion? If so, please indicate by raising your hand, and I'll make a list of those who have indicated with the assistance of the monitoring officer, and I'll use my discretion as to which order I will call members to speak. Please keep your hand raised until you've been acknowledged. Right, thank you, members. I'll first invite Councillor Schweer.
Thank you, Chair. I just really wanted to speak in support of this motion because I think this is really important. I think Councillor Parker outlined what it is under the circumstances. And I think what is really important here is the fact of the taking energy from its source, which is potentially the wind farms in the North Sea, to where it's wanted for distribution, which is towards Tilbury. So effectively, that really means that there is no great need for putting 50-metre pylons across vast swathes of the countryside from Norfolk all the way through to Essex. And as indicated by National Grid already, the technology is there to take that power from its source to actually where it actually needs. And it is true that we don't know the cost. I think we are all aware of the strings of pylons that exist already, and the proposal to put some more south of Braintree here, but obviously it's going to be potentially tri-county. It has an enormous cost. It's a cost in our skyline, and it's a cost to us every single day. It's a cost to our communities, it's a cost to our business, and it's also a cost to our tourists as well, which are ever increasingly coming into this part of East Anglia, because we all appreciate and know what wonderful parts of East Anglia are to us all. And of course this has a direct bearing on our residents every single day, because those that probably live within 6 to 9 miles, depending on the flatness of the land, have got views of these strings that are permanently fixed in the sky. And also, I would just like to remind all of us here tonight the importance of this decision, because this is a decision that is not only going to affect potentially us and our residents now, it's going to affect us for generations, as will the pylons, because the pylons potentially will be there for 100 years at least. And that has an enormous cost and a bearing on everything that we like about East Anglia. So the technology is there to do it, and there is no reason. The interconnectors are simple, and as Councillor Parker mentioned, there are sea links already in existence from the Essex coast to Kent. There's also interconnectors back to Norway and Denmark, I believe, and they're for use in Scotland. So it is a technology that's proven and it's in existence. And I totally support this motion because it is feasible, and it's a cost that I do not believe that not only we in Braintree District Council, but we in Essex should not have to pay that cost that's going to last for generations when there is a very viable alternative. And even if that cost is slightly more, financially more in the long term, it doesn't measure up to what it's going to cost us all across the district and the county and the region. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Schwer. Councillor Beavis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to agree wholeheartedly with the words of Councillor Iona Parker and also Councillor Swear, if I may. I mean, look, this isn't the first time that this council has taken on, so to speak, National Grid, and in many aspects have already won sort of part of the protection of our countryside. Can you hear me okay, Chairman? Yeah, so you wasn't sure whether you could hear me okay, thank you. But what I will say, going back to that time, was in terms of local members, it took an awful lot of our time to attend community meetings, to attend meetings with Essex County Council, to attend meetings with Suffolk County Council. I remember very well, actually, myself and Councillor Scattergood at the time as the ward members in Castle Hedingham. We were pretty much attending meetings every week on this issue. And at that stage, they wanted to put a substation, a huge substation actually, in Castle Hedingham. And there were pylons coming pretty much right down to our boundaries. And we fought that. And we even had, on one occasion, just to prove that this, this can be done, one of the heads of National Grid came for afternoon tea at our parish council chairman, who actually sadly has passed away, but she was quite a feisty character, and I'll never forget it. And we actually battled over this issue over a cup of tea and a jam sponge, but actually, tongue in cheek, it worked. And I wish this council every success in trying to fight off as much as we can, look to underground as much as we can, and to protect our countryside, because as Councillor Swear said, we've only got one opportunity to do this, and if we don't act quickly, then I'm afraid it will be detrimental to our landscape. And just in summary, I took a drive out this afternoon towards Whitecone and Oldham, and there are banners, there are posters, there are placards everywhere saying stop the pylons and to sign the petition. So this really does mean a lot to local residents in the Braintree district. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Beavis. Councillor Dervish.
Thank you, Chairman. I support this motion, and I object to the horrendous pylons proposed, which will be coming through my ward and impacting especially on Fuller Street and damaging valuable outstanding countryside. Is it not enough we have taken countryside in Hatfield Peveril to build over 600 new homes? Is it not enough we have proposals to house the largest solar panel farm in the country within my ward? Is it not enough my ward is soon to face absolute chaos with road diversions in order to facilitate the widening of the A12, damaging valuable countryside with excess traffic coming through Turling? There are alternatives to the existing proposals for these pylons, and I urge National Grid to strongly look at and adopt the alternatives for the sake of our countryside, my ward, our district and local residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dervish. Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the previous remarks, which I thought was succinct and professional. From a planning viewpoint, I think a couple of other factors have not been mentioned, at least this evening. I think the consequences of these pylons, which would effectively be permanent, would have consequences, as recent discussions, including with Councillor Parker on solar energy, on the rural heritage and lifestyle. And that's important in our rural environment. Landscape and amenity, the effects on agriculture, and lastly, I think consequences in terms of, as somebody has just referred, I think, to disturbance, not just during construction, but during maintenance. And one other point, group of factors, why is our area being treated differently than some of the other ones with the subsea consequences, subsea alternatives? Are all councils cooperating in a stance on this? I hope it won't get to this, but if necessary, if the planning arguments aren't being listened to, I would hope we'd look at legal options. And very lastly, it reminds me of a point, an old adage, one's aware of the cost of everything but the value of nothing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. And Councillor Abbott?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just following on from all the speakers, but particularly Councillor Dervish, in my 8 years as County Councillor, the areas around Fairsted and Fuller Street, I would say, are some of the most attractive landscape in the south of the district. We've got many beautiful areas, but they are particularly, the idea of putting pylons 162 feet high in old money through there is, well, it's shocking, really. Can I say that on this side we welcome the acceptance of the amendments we proposed, which added into the motion two specific matters, one specifically to say how high the pylons were, and secondly to underscore the potential for the alternative of going undersea. We also welcome the unanimous position of the local plan committee taken recently about the concerns on the rural impact. I myself attended a number of events and had quite a long time talking one-to-one with National Grid representatives. And what really concerned me was that they said they'd done these initial assessments, but actually when you drilled down and asked them, well, what about that particular listed building or that particular ancient woodland, they didn't know about them. In fact, through Rivenhall is particularly badly affected, and their swathe through Rivenhall completely covers one of our ancient woodlands, and they said they were trying to avoid them. So they don't appear to know what's on the ground, which is very worrying. These National Grid proposals dropped metaphorically from a very great height onto communities across the south of the Braintree district. And National Grid appear to have essentially decided that the pylons plan was what they were going to do. And going through their documents, it appeared to be a typical tick box and tweak exercise. We do the consultation we're required to do, we tweak it a bit, then say we've listened and go ahead anyway. That's not a genuine consultation, and particularly at this stage, because we're at pre-planning. There's no need for them to be so prescriptive about what they want to do at this stage. There appears to be a growing coalescence from local parishes and communities, higher tier authorities, and a good number of MPs. The offshore option must be fully considered. Before anyone accuses me of NIMBYism, I absolutely support the expansion of offshore wind energy as a key means of increasing clean and renewable energy, and have done for very many years. Wind energy currently contributes most of the 1/3 of UK grid power now being generated by renewables. That's only going to increase as years go by, and the base load for that is coming from wind plus storage, which is obviously a big issue because of the intermittency factor. Decreasing carbon emissions, increasing homegrown energy, particularly with the situation in Ukraine, are also very important. National Grid appear, as other speakers have said, to have forgotten that this project is to get power from a place in the sea, or several places, to a coastal location. And so therefore, at Tilbury, so therefore going around the coast must be an option they need to look at, not least because this plan and previous plans they've had also include undersea cables. It's perfectly possible to do it, and so I've got no reservation, Mr. Chairman, in supporting the amended motion.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. Councillor Butland.
Thank you, Chairman. Just one small point I just want to pick up on, because Councillor Walsh quite rightly raised the issue about are all councils working together. At the Essex leaders meeting, it was agreed by all leaders that we would submit a letter signed by the leaders of all 15 councils prior to the closure of the date. I held fire on signing it until we had the local plan committee meeting here, because I wanted it to be this council's support. I felt with the fact that the local plan committee chairman was a unanimous decision that gave me sufficient authority, if you like, to sign on behalf of this council. But I have never known 15 councils so united on a particular issue as on this. And I think it's also fair to say a huge number, if not all, members of Parliament in Essex as well, also united on it. So I just wanted to pick up on that point, that all authorities are of the same view as far as the 15 local authorities in Essex are concerned.
Thank you, Councillor Butland. Any other members wish to speak? Right, so Councillor Wrench, as you seconded this motion, reserving your right to speak and have not yet spoken in the debate, please can I invite you to speak now?
Thank you, Chairman. As mentioned in the letter, which was approved unanimously by the Local Plan Subcommittee in regards to the East Anglia Green non-statutory consultation, it states the proposed route runs through an important area of the district, and I think many councillors today have described their wards and how important it is to them. It is home to many heritage assets, wildlife sites, ancient woodland, amongst others. It has also been identified as a climate focus area by the Essex Climate Commissioners. The route is not sufficiently justified, as no information has been provided on alternative options such as the offshore route. We have heard this evening about undergrounding, but that can have significant impact on the local ecology, as it requires a large strip of land to be cleared and limited vegetation can be reintroduced after. This would have to be assessed against any landscape impact or impact on historic assets, so that the most appropriate option can be used depending on the particular circumstances in any given location. In my view, the way to go is the offshore route. This area has significant development pressure for housing and economic growth, and such alternatives such as offshore routes need to be fully considered before opting for the onshore route. I agree wholeheartedly with all that have spoke this evening on this motion, and I'm delighted we seem to have common ground across the chamber. Councillor Sphere mentioned the significant cost that we would see, both in terms of how our district's landscape would change forever, but he also stated an important point that we do have the technology to be able to deliver the offshore alternative. Councillor Beavis mentioned the success of past consultation, and that shows that we do need to stand for what we believe is right. Councillor Dervish mentioned not only would her ward, amongst others, would have a significant impact, we also have a huge solar panel development being undertaken across her wards, but we also have been a beacon as a council, having many developments with high grading for solar technology, and also GridSurf must be mentioned. We've already had a response to Councillor Walsh, but also I agree with Councillor Abbott. We do have an extremely attractive landscape. Our district has many beautiful areas, and that's why collectively we call it home. These upgrades are needed, but it absolutely cannot be at the detriment to our residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wrench. Councillor Mrs Parker, as the proposer of the motion, would you like to reply to the speeches and close the debate? Please can I remind you that you should confine your reply to previous speeches and you should not introduce any new matters.
Thank you, Mr Chairman, and thank you very much, members who have spoken for your support for this motion. Just particularly like to pick up a few points. Councillor Swear is quite right about the impact this would have on the skyline. It won't just affect communities that live directly underneath, but will be seen from very long distances, so have a much wider impact across the countryside. And also, he's also right to point out, as others have done, that it effectively be a permanent change. These don't have a 40-year lifespan on them. It's not a temporary situation. Councillor Beavis also, I was interested to hear about the depth of opposition that's growing in other areas that are being that are under the route, and Councillor Dervish also pointing out quite rightly the sort of cumulative impact that her ward is facing from lots of other developments, and as it's pointed out, a particularly lovely part of the district, that southern sort of the triangle around Fairsted and Turling. So I can understand her depth of concern over that. Councillor Walsh also right to point out the impact on rural heritage, which I think is often something that is overlooked and is something of significance. Also, I would like to support Councillor Abbott in saying that we certainly I do support offshore wind as a means of generating low carbon energy and local homegrown energy, as he puts it. And finally, I was pleased to hear Councillor Butland mentioning the united position of all Essex County councillors. So thank you, members.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs. Parker. And if only we could sort it all out with cups of tea and a piece of cake, everything would be pretty good. But with National Grid having held a consultative meeting for this council back on the 21st of April, of which myself and 5 members attended, I would hope that they're going to hold to their promise of listening to us all, and therefore I will put this to the vote. So the members, the motion is set out in the addendum report has been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please indicate. Thank you, members. That is unanimous. The motion is approved. So we'll now deal with agenda item 7, the motion by Councillor Tom Cunningham, which is congratulations to Her Majesty the Queen on her Platinum Jubilee. This motion is set out on page 8 of the agenda. Before inviting Councillor Cunningham to present his motion, I can confirm that no amendments have been received and the motion remains as published in the agenda. As Councillor Cunningham and Councillor Butland, the proposer and seconder of the motion, are present, this item may proceed. Councillor Cunningham, please can you formally move your motion, and can I remind you that before you make your speech on the motion it must be seconded.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the motion as set out in the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cunningham. Councillor Graham Butland, you are recorded as the seconder of this motion. Please confirm that you second this motion, and do you wish to speak after Councillor Cunningham's speech or reserve your right?
I second the motion, Chairman, reserve my right.
Thank you, Councillor Butland. Members, the motion has been formally moved and seconded by Councillor Cunningham and Councillor Butland. I'll now invite Councillor Cunningham, to make his speech.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure to bring this motion to full council this evening. The events of the Platinum Jubilee weekend captured the imagination of the nation, and warmth, affection, admiration seem to transcend all the differences in society, and indeed views of the monarchy, from ardent royalists to those who perhaps think a republican model is more appropriate. There largely seemed to be a common desire to applaud the uniqueness of the moment and reflect on the longevity of the service of Her Majesty the Queen, and appreciate the dignity, conscientiousness, spirit, humour and warmth of a wonderful person who, as a young woman, dedicated her life, be it long or short, to the service of the nation and Commonwealth. It's difficult to add more than what has already been said in recent weeks. Yet locally, as we saw our communities rise to celebrate, once again, the very best of our district and its sense of community was shown. As we have seen so often, and in particular over the last 2.5 years, when the world seemed such a dark place. The decades of great service that underpin Her Majesty's life stretch beyond the 70 years of wearing the crown. We think of the young Princess Elizabeth with her young sister Princess Margaret sending best wishes by radio to those who had been evacuated at the start of World War II, recently remembered when she broadcast a message of hope during the first pandemic lockdown in 2020. We think of the young princess serving in uniform during the war, little realising that in a few short years she would assume such great responsibility. As we pay tribute to Her Majesty's Platinum Jubilee and acknowledge the celebrations and tributes paid by the District of Braintree, we reflect not only on Her Majesty's reign, but the period of time of her reign, and the great changes in society during that period, and also the remarkable qualities of a very special generation of human beings, the Queen's generation, a generation of parents, grandparents and great-grandparents who we can all relate to, the greatest generation without question, which Her Majesty continues to personify with vigour, spirit and service, and long may she continue to do so. This Elizabethan age will never be repeated, and in Braintree tonight, may we echo the words so brilliantly delivered by Mr. Paddington Bear during the concert over the Jubilee weekend. Happy Jubilee, ma'am. Thank you for everything.
Thank you, Councillor Cunningham. Members, we now move to debate on this motion. Please can I remind members that they may only speak once on this motion. Speeches should relate strictly to the motion under discussion and be necessary for the progression of the debate or to a point of order relating to procedure. I will curtail excessive speeches or where the speech no longer addresses the motion. Do any members wish to speak on this motion? If so, please indicate by raising your hand, and once again I'll make the list and use my discretion as to the order. Councillor. Councillor Beavis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just very quickly, if I may, a great speech, I thought, by Councillor Cunningham, and one can completely support that. I mean, I think what it was in terms of councillor was a real opportunity to fulfil the front role of a councillor, which I think is really, really important. And, you know, I was so busy out in my ward attending some pretty amazing events. Flags were flying, sponges were being made, tea was flowing, and it's everything that we would really expect of an afternoon tea party. It was just completely fabulous. But I think in sort of more of a personal capacity, as I may, watching the television over the complete weekend, I was completely hooked. And what I think we're seeing now is looking to the future, actually, building on the legacy of our Queen and her reign. And which is really about people and communities. I didn't think it was at all complicated. She is saying and doing exactly that, listening and engaging in a way that we can all watch and learn and carry out in our own lives and professional capacities. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Beavis. Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think Councillor Cunningham has really summarised what a fabulous weekend of celebration it was for Her Majesty the Queen. Reflected even more so by the way that this district really took to the Platinum Jubilee and celebrating it with real gusto. Normally this authority would have supported such Jubilee events by maybe leading on one or two main events. This time round, acknowledging the Platinum Jubilee, we enabled so many community leaders, volunteers across the district, and turned our expertise to giving them advice on how they can run an event for the Jubilee. A group of 19 officers within the civic team that really helped to deliver that across our district and act as enablers for those that wanted to run street parties or smaller events to capture the spirit of the Platinum Jubilee. So my thanks to them, as well as obviously thanks to Her Majesty the Queen. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, it was a great weekend, and I like what Councillor Cunningham said about bringing people together who might have not all the same opinions, but it was a great community event. And the weather held out this year. I don't know if people remember the 60th. There was some absolutely dire weather, as indeed for weather anoraks like myself, there was on the Queen's Coronation Day, which is one of the coldest days in June ever recorded, but there we are. Councillor Wright and I attended 4 events in our ward, 2 fetes, a tea. But the main thing I wanted to talk about was the oak tree we planted, which Rivenhall Parish Council organised. Lots of people came up to the planting, and I said a few words. And what I said was that I thought this was very fitting for 2 reasons. One, oak trees are very long living, Queen's longevity, robustness, how much she's stuck through the years, and the amazing changes since she's seen. And indeed the fact that in Rivenhall we believe we have a few oak trees which may have been alive during the first Elizabethan era, though they're over 400 years old. But also because the Parish Council has taken part in the Queen's Green Canopy tree planting. We planted over 100 trees this year, and this one was the last one which completed that. They've all been registered and stands not that far from the 60th Jubilee tree, and that one's doing well on the village green. If anyone wants to visit Rivenhall, who doesn't know, I'm sure many of you do, there's, near the village green where the junction of Rickstones Road and Oak Road are, is locally known as the Oak, and there is a fine collection of oak trees which are several hundred years old, and these two Jubilee oaks we hope will survive to possibly replace them in centuries to come. So I thought that was, a fitting way of marking the Jubilee in our own small way. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. Once again, tea and cake make it into this one as well. But it also shows that my 21 events pale into insignificance, where Her Majesty's already amassed over 27,000 events in her 70-year reign. So, hats off to her. Councillor Butland, as you have seconded the debate and reserved your right, would you like to speak now?
Thank you, Chairman. I speak with some guilt because, of course, I was not in the country at the time of the Jubilee weekend, thanks to COVID reorganised holidays. But I had the chance of observing the Jubilee from the deepest south of America, Mississippi, Louisiana and Alabama. And I can assure you, Chairman and colleagues, that the Jubilee was followed as closely over there as it was here. Every morning, the major programmes, including Good Morning America, broadcast live from outside Buckingham Palace for a good 10 minutes, quarter of an hour on the hour, the key periods of time. And indeed, most of the live concert was also broadcast. But where it became most touching was when I went outside and talked, and people say, "Oh, I love your accent." And I have to say, no, I haven't got an accent. You've got an accent. But a real interest. I do silently think that country desperately wants to have the monarchy back again. But a real interest, and it shows just how much Her Majesty transcends national boundaries, etc. It was really followed and felt to be a major thing. And it was proud to be a Brit in the US on that weekend. But I did follow here on social media what was going on, and it does appear that people in this district really, not only this district, but particularly this district, actually really came together to celebrate that probably once in a lifetime, once in a generation, once in a multi-generation thing. So I was disappointed to have missed it, but on the other hand, really proud to have seen how well it was received in other parts of the country, the world rather. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butland. Councillor Cunningham, as the proposer of the motion, would you like to reply to the speeches and close the debate? Please can I remind you that you should confine your reply to previous speeches and you should not introduce any new matters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the warmth of sentiment across the Council, Chairman, speaks for itself and has done this evening, so I won't add anything else. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Cunningham. Well, we'll find out. We'll put it to the vote. Members, this motion as set out on the agenda has been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please indicate. Thank you, members. That is unanimous, and the motion is approved. Thank you, members. Now to deal with agenda item number 8, which is the motion by Councillor Mrs. Jo Beavis, the cost of living crisis. Members, following the publication, this report as set out on pages 9 and 10 of the agenda, an amendment to the published motion was received in accordance with the Council Procedure Rules. Councillor Mrs. Beavis and Councillor Abbott, as the proposer and seconder of the original motion, were consulted and have consented to the amendment. As a consequence of this acceptance, the amended motion is the substantive motion to be considered this evening. Members, please can I remind you that an addendum report setting out the amended motion was also published and circulated to all members on Friday the 17th of June, and we will be referring to the addendum report for the debate. As Councillor Beavis and Councillor Abbott, proposer and seconder of the motion, are present, this item may proceed. Councillor Mrs. Beavis, please can you formally move your motion, and please can I remind you that before you make your speech on your motion, it must be seconded.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I may, just very quickly, maybe it's a little point of order, I'm not sure, but I seem to have a copy of your order papers this evening. I'm not sure, and I've never done it like this before, but I'm following them, and they're jolly useful. So I'm not following the agenda, so I'm scooting through the points. So they're very useful. So
you know what happens behind the scenes.
It's very, very impressive. So I would like to move the motion as amended, which is now the substantive motion. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Beavis. Councillor Abbott, you are recorded as a seconder of the motion. Please confirm that you second this motion. Do you wish to speak after Councillor Mrs. Beavis' speech or reserve your right? Please.
Thank you, Chairman. I second the motion and reserve the right.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. So, members, the motion has been formally moved and seconded by Councillor Mrs. Beavis and Councillor Abbott. I will now invite Councillor Mrs. Beavis to make her speech.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman, and I am pleased to move tonight's motion on the cost of living crisis. I'm grateful to my leader who seconded the motion, and I'm also pleased to accept the amendments through the Council's governance process in order that this motion can be debated this evening. Chairman, following Brexit, the pandemic, and following the situation in Ukraine, possibly all adding to the cost of living crisis. Inflation is increasing, petrol is rising, energy bills in most cases are doubling, with further increases expected this October. Residents are switching off their heating, cutting back on essential items, and cancelling their luxuries such as hospitality and, in many cases, holidays. The gap between the higher paid and the lower paid is widening, according to national surveying. More people are using food banks, taking charity, and quite frankly struggling to make ends meet, particularly those with young children. These are my concerns in bringing forward tonight's motion, but I am pleased to read the actions of tonight's motion, and I look forward to receiving further information from Council on how we, Braintree District Council, can help and support in a meaningful way those most vulnerable and at risk of poverty in our district. I thought what we did through the coronavirus period of updating residents on what was available for them financially worked really, really well. And if I was going to input into the process going forward, I would hope that we can signpost local residents to opportunities to hopefully help them out financially if they really do need our help and support. I so move, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Beavis. Members, we now move to debate on this motion. Please can I remind members that they may only speak once on this motion. Speeches should relate strictly to the motion under discussion and be necessary for the progression of the debate or to a point of order relating to procedure. Again, I will curtail excessive speeches or where the speech no longer addresses the motion. Do any members wish to speak on this motion? And if so, please indicate by raising your hand. And again, we'll be making a list and with the assistance of the monitoring officer. And again, I'll use my discretion which order I will call you forward. Please keep your hands raised until you've been acknowledged. Thank you, members. Councillor Mrs. Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I support this motion. I just really would like to just acknowledge really the effect that the increase in fuel prices is having, particularly on people in rural areas. Been a significant increase. Petrol and diesel, there's very little difference between the two now, and they still keep climbing higher and higher. Acknowledging that a lot of this is outside due to external worldwide events, but obviously it's having a huge impact on residents, particularly in those in rural areas. I think there's a particular impact on small businessmen and tradesmen who rely on vans and cars to visit clients and customers who must be really suffering as a result of the increase in their costs. So I'm pleased this motion has come forward, and I'm pleased that the suggestion has come that the scrutiny committee look at what measures we can take as a council to try and alleviate some of these pressures on our residents. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That's a final point. Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be fairly brief. I think and I'm pleased that the tenor of this, like our other debates this evening, is constructive and beyond not partisan. I think the cost of living crisis, most people would agree, affects everyone. Some, of course, fundamentally, others tangentially, but some irrevocably. And I think I'm unlikely to be contradicted. I think it's the primary public policy issue of our time. You may say, why are we talking about it here in Braintree, in the headquarters of Braintree District Council? The situation is likely to and may well get worse. And I think it could well have many consequences that impinge upon direct and indirect responsibilities of ours. Homelessness, absolute or fuel poverty, and or child poverty. These of course can have additional load on us as a district council and many of our residents in terms of social services, housing, education, and in some cases even crime. And it's an issue that goes beyond party, and I don't mean to be trite. It goes beyond party politics and even the politics of parties. So I emphasise the non-partisan nature of this discussion. Personally, I very much support setting up this all-party motion with the group comprising members of community development and partnership development. And I'm not on those particular committees, but if it's possible that interested members who want to help from other committees might join in. The final couple of things I wanted to say. I had a chance to look east this evening. It was the first item on the regional news where it was said that for those households in debt, and they did say for those in debt, average debt in our region is now £19,000, and it's the highest in the UK. I mean, this is worrying. And finally, as we heard in national news, inflation is now expected to go to 11%. Costs are rising at the highest level since the 40s, if not the 50s. But the most touching thing I heard was a mother and son being interviewed, and the mother was sort of slightly telling off the boy for not eating his food. And he said, "I'm not going to eat it, Mum, because I've noticed you haven't eaten for 2 days." So as a council, this goes beyond statistics. I think we should do whatever we can to help in this area. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. Councillor Raymond.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I fully support this motion. As my colleagues have said, that cost of living has impacting and affecting everyone in the country and people of this district. However, the central government recognises that many households need support to help deal with rising cost of living. Hence, it has introduced targeted support to help families and individuals help people with their energy bills. The government is providing a £15 billion energy bill rebate package worth up to £550 each for around 28 million households. The rising national insurance contribution thresholds, the government has helped 30 million people by giving them an extra £330 by rise the threshold in next month. The new threshold is £12,570. The government has also cut the fuel duty by 5p, though many of the garages has not passed on the benefit to the people. However, the government is looking into it and making sure that the garages and the gas stations would pass on this to the consumers. However, I would like to say one thing, that if people are really struggling, there is a lot of help out there that people might not necessarily know they are eligible So the central government has filtered down some fundings to the local council that people can go and apply for. So this kind of help that individuals need to apply for rather than an automatic rebate. So it's worth going to the organization like Citizen Advice, where they would be able to look at your income and outgoings and see if there is any additional benefit or support that you might be eligible to. Because so many benefits are out there which are underclaimed, and people could be getting more money and support from the local councils and the organisations. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Raymond. And dare I say, from my list of engagements, I had the pleasure of seeing the Whittam Community Hub and the Halstead Community Fridge. So there are two excellent facilities out there in the district that other places could follow. Councillor McKee.
Thank you, Chairman. I fully support this motion to consider what more this council could do to help the poorest residents in our district cope with the rising cost of living that is affecting this country, but we must remember it's also affecting our Europe, the whole of Europe, and our global trading partners. It's not unique to the United Kingdom that this is a cost of living crisis. The motion refers to the help already provided by the Conservative government, and that support, totalling £37 billion this year, is targeted at those who are most in need of help. The most vulnerable households will receive at least £1,200 support in total this year to help with the cost of living, with all domestic electricity customers receiving at least £400 to help with their bills. However, this administration has not been complacent in believing that this is sufficient. When cost of living crisis became evident, I asked officers to consider the ways in which we could help using the powers available to us to make additional interventions to help the most vulnerable in the district. The work has started and will be considered by Cabinet in due course. This motion, if approved, will support that work and therefore welcome the Cabinet intervention or initiatives into the two committees looking at it. However, I'd like to remind members of a range of initiatives that the government has already introduced in that £37 billion, just to get the record straight that this isn't mindful. Help with energy bills. The government is providing £15 billion energy bills rebate package worth up to £550 each for around 28 million households. £650 cost of living payment for those on benefits. More than 8 million households on means-tested benefit will receive £650. £300 pensioner cost of living payment, £150 disability cost of living payment, household support fund, raising national insurance contribution thresholds, reducing national insurance contributions for lower earning self-employed people, cutting fuel duty, freezing alcohol duty, winter fuel payments, cold weather payments, which is £25 extra week for poorer households when the temperature is 0 or below. So I fully support this motion, but I don't want anyone listening to this think that the government is a cold-hearted, not caring about residents during this cost of living crisis. I submit. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McKee. Any other members? No. Then, Councillor Abbott, as you seconded this motion, reserving your right to speak and have not yet spoken in the debate, please can I invite you to speak now?
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, we would, on this side, like to thank the administration for effectively supporting this motion by amending it in a careful way. Obviously, as the largest opposition, we're still the minority, so when we put forward a motion, we don't know whether it's going to be amended to hell, whether it's going to be amended a bit that it passes. So we do thank you for taking consideration of that, and also for the very helpful way in which the administration is focused on how we take it forward. So we weren't sure whether we should be specific about what committee. You've effectively done that for us. Councillor Parker spoke on fuel prices. Quite rightly, they only appear to be going one way, and that's up. Councillor Walsh spoke about how this is becoming the major public policy issue. And Councillor Raymond talked about the targeted support, and Councillor McKee about the broader support. We did in the original motion be very clear that we recognise the government is providing support, but the government itself has said, cabinet members themselves have said, they can't cover all eventualities. Obviously what their focus is going to be is on trying to protect those who are most vulnerable, and they've done that as far as they can, and that's absolutely right. But I think that one of the reasons we wanted to raise this was this is not an issue where we know where the conclusion is. We don't know how much further energy prices are going to go up. We don't know how much higher inflation is going to go. Originally, it was talking about 8-9%. We're now talking about 11%, possibly more. And of course, inflation is a really insidious beast. Those who were around, like myself and many other members here in the 1970s, remember what it did. It eats away at savings. It eats away at incomes. It means that if you get you manage to negotiate an increase in your wage, in real terms, it's decreased unless you can get anywhere near the inflation level. So it's a nasty beast, inflation, and I think everyone would wish the government well on trying to curb it. And of course, the other economic aspect of that is the published inflation rate is an average. Individual inflation rates can be different, and particularly with food prices escalating so quickly, that's going to affect the poorest most. I think for me personally, the most worrying aspect is where energy prices are going to go, where gas and electricity prices are going to go. We already know, and the government has basically intervened before it happened, that there's going to be another increase in the cap this autumn. What if there's another one in the spring following that? It's quite a frightening prospect. So, in conclusion, Mr. Chairman, it's very welcome to see the room being as one, so to speak, on this issue, as we have been on the previous two motions, which is great. And I would urge all members to support the amended motion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. Councillor Mrs Beavis, as the proposer of the motion, would you like to reply to the speeches and close the debate? Please can I remind you that you should confine your reply to previous speeches and you should not introduce any new matters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think for me, what is really important about the motion this evening is we're not just talking the talk, we're going to walk the walk. We're not just going to walk on by. And there's a piece of work to be done, and I think that's really quite important. But what I will say is this. There's much debate nationally about, is this crisis as bad as the crisis we had in the 1970s? I don't know, only time will tell. But what I do know is that it's one of the biggest financial crises of my lifetime, and I can remember living through many of them. And I think this is a very, very difficult time for us. I want to thank Council, excuse me, for supporting the motion this evening. And as I said previously, I look forward to watching this very carefully and that we're going to get the actions back to Council. Thank you, members. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs Beavis. I will now put the motion to the vote. Members, the motion as set out in the addendum report has been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please indicate. And once again, we have a unanimous vote, so that motion is approved. So, thank you, members. We'll now deal with agenda item 9, the appointment of the Chief Executive and Head of Paid Services. Members, the report for this agenda item was circulated to all members also on Friday the 17th of June. And please kindly I invite Councillor Batland, Chairman of the Appointment Committee and the Leader of the Council, to introduce the report and move the recommendations. Please can I remind you that before you make your speech, your recommendation must be seconded. Councillor Batland.
Thank you, Chairman. I will move the recommendations in paragraph 2 of the paper on the agenda tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Batland. Councillor Batland has moved the recommendation as set out in the report. Please can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Abbott.
Happy to second.
Do you wish to reserve your right to speak?
I do.
Thank you. I now invite Councillor Batland to speak on this matter.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the Council. When our existing Chief Executive, Andy Wright, gave notice earlier in the year of his intention to retire at the end of August, clearly it was necessary for us to set in train a selection process for his successor. In common with what we have done traditionally over certainly the last 20-odd years, I was keen to involve all opposition groups on the selection process, and I'm delighted that Councillor Abbott, Councillor Mrs Pell and Councillor Mann readily agreed to participate in that. The first of all, we engaged the services of Solace, who have been provided very good service on a number of senior appointments that we have made. And their main task was, first of all, to establish whether there was a field out there of potential candidates and to discuss issues with potential candidates. I'm delighted to say that there was a healthy number of people who were interested in the post, and following initial sifting, if I can put it that way, by Solace, a long list of potential candidates was presented to the Appointments Committee. That list was then brought to a short list, initially of 4, although one candidate, Chairman, did withdraw through personal circumstances before we reached the final selection process. Members will see in paragraphs 3.2 through to 3.5 the rigorous exercise that was undertaken with all 3 candidates. In the 2 days they were here, they were basically on the go at all times. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank those people who helped in the selection process. Our stakeholder colleagues from the police, the NHS, local business, charitable sector, who kindly gave up their time to have discussion, interview with each of the candidates and to feed back to, through Solace, their views on each candidate. The corporate management team, which wasn't just the executive directors, but all our heads of service, etc., also had the opportunity to meet all 3 candidates. And I'm also particularly grateful to those members of this council who made themselves available for, as we term, speed dating with each of the candidates. Following that, there was then a formal interview the following day with all members of the committee, my colleagues, Councillors Cunningham, Gabrielle Spray and Richard Van Dolken, together with Councillors Abbott, Pell and Mann. And each interview lasted at least an hour, if not more, and covered a number of, well, all, I think, of the aspects that we wanted to test in each candidate. I'm delighted to say at the end of that process that it was the unanimous decision of all 7 members as to who the successful candidate should be. And that candidate is Dan Gascoigne, currently the Deputy Chief Executive at Colchester. I'm delighted to say that he has indicated that should Council tonight confirm the view of the appointments panel, that he will be happy to accept the post. And I know he is keen to meet with our existing Chief Exec to ensure that there is as smooth a handover as possible. So I think it's been an exhaustive process. I think I can assure members that I believe we have got a good, very good candidate to succeed Andy Wright and continue the line of very successful chief executives that we had. And I have no hesitation in recommending to Council that we appoint Dan Gascoigne as the Council's Head of Paid Service or Chief Executive, as well as the Electoral Returning Officer and Electoral Registration Officer, with effect from a start date to be confirmed, and that all delegations under the Constitution, which are in the name of the Chief Executive and or Head of Paid Service and Returning Officer, will be effective from the confirmed start date. I so move, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Butland. Do any members wish to speak on this motion? If so, please indicate by raising your hand. We'll make a list of those who indicate with the assistance of the monitoring officer. Nobody? Okay, Councillor Abbott, if you want to.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I won't say too much other than to fully agree with the Leader of the Council that it was a very good and very thorough process. And notably a unanimous decision. The only thing I just wanted to raise, putting the anorak back on, at 355 it says that the Chief Executive has responsibility for European elections. I don't think we're going to have any in the near future. Should the report be amended on that basis? Otherwise, I'm happy to second.
We considered this point and we decided we would put it in, Chairman, so that Councillor Abbott could actually pick it up. If there were to be any European elections, he might well be responsible for it. But I think that is unlikely, certainly in the first year of his tenure.
So does that mean there's a chance of another referendum? I'm not going. Well, no members have indicated that they wish to speak on this item, so I'll invite Councillor Batland, unless you've already done so, as the proposer of the recommendations, to bring this item to a close before
Nothing further to add, Chairman.
Put the recommendations to the vote.
Nothing further to add, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Batland. So the recommendations as set out in the report have been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please indicate. And yet again, we have a unanimous vote. Isn't that easy? There you go. I hope all the meetings are going to be like this. Thank you, members. So we'll now deal with item 10 on your agenda, which is Braintree District Council's revised licensing policy statement in respect of the Gambling Act of 2005. Members, this item is set out on pages 11 to 56 of your agenda. Please can I invite Councillor Bohr, Chairman of the Licensing Committee, to introduce the report and move the recommendation. And can I please remind you that before you make your speech, your recommendations must be seconded.
Thank you very much, Chairman. In introducing this policy...
You are simply moving it, Councillor Bohr.
Sorry?
You are simply moving it.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I'm moving to approve this policy.
Thank you, Councillor Bohr. Councillor Bohr's moved the recommendation as set out on page 11 of the agenda. Please can we have a seconder? Councillor Eusden, do you wish to reserve your right to speak?
Yes, please.
Thank you, Councillor Eusden. I'll now invite Councillor Bohr to speak on the matter.
Thank you very much, Chairman. In introducing this policy, I have to say that the Council's gambling policy has to be reviewed every 3 years. Excuse me. And prior to the expiry of the 2019 policy, this was carried out. It was submitted for public consultation between the 4th of January and the 6th of March of this year, and no comments were received. As there has been no change to the Gambling Act 2005 or to the guidance from the Gambling Commission, which affects the Council's policy, the document before you is therefore unchanged, save for changes in technical terms, names, titles, or typographical errors. You may have noticed that the 5th edition of guidance from the Gambling Commission is amongst the list of documents in this report, but again, this does not affect our policy. A review to the 2005 Gambling Act was planned by central government, but this has been delayed. It is possible that new guidance may be introduced by the end of the year, and if that does occur, then our policy will be checked for any possible conflicts and any necessary changes made. Under the Council's scheme of delegation, minor changes could then be made by the Head of Service in consultation with the Chair of the Licensing Committee, but substantive changes will of course need to go through the formal process. Approval of the current unchanged policy is needed to ensure that the Council operates its licensing policy legally. This will allow, this policy has been approved at Licensing Committee, and approving this at full Council will allow the Council to publish its intent publish the licensing policy and will enable the policy to come into effect on the 1st of August 2022. I therefore recommend this policy document to members for approval tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Bull. Do any members wish to speak on this item? If so, please indicate by raising your hand. And again, I'll make a list if so. Nobody? Okay. Councillor Euston, do you have anything to add?
And nothing to add, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Euston. So, as no members have indicated they wish to speak on this item, Councillor Bull, as the proposer of the recommendation, would you like to bring this item to a close before I put the recommendation to the vote?
Yes, I recommend this for your approval.
Simple as that, we like it. Thank you, members. The recommendations set out on page 11 of the agenda have been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please indicate. That's too easy. That's unanimous once again. Thank you, members. So that is, the recommendation is approved. We'll now proceed to item 11 on the agenda, which is the development of a community centre for Maltings Lane in Witham. Members, this item is set out on pages 57 to 62 of the agenda. Please can I invite Councillor Bowers to introduce the report and move the recommendations. And please can I remind you that before you make your speech, your recommendations must be seconded. Councillor Bowers.
Thank you, Chairman. I formally move the recommendations on page 57 in section 2. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Bowers. Councillor Bowers has moved the recommendations as set out on page 57 of the agenda. Please can we have a seconder?
I formally second, Chairman, reserve the right.
Thank you, Councillor Butland. Councillor Bowers, would you like to?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm pleased to be introducing this item tonight to Council and obviously formally move the recommendations following agreement to proceed at Cabinet. I'm introducing this item as I'm the Cabinet member responsible for assets, and this will be a wonderful asset for our district. As I mentioned at Cabinet, there has been a large amount of work to get to this stage, which has been led by Councillor Ritchie, who, following my introduction to this item, will be able to provide more detail on the Maltings Lane project and what it will bring to the residents of Witham and the wider area. As explained in the report being brought to you tonight, a design for the community centre that meets the requirements of the community and relevant Section 106 contributions funding criteria has been completed. It is not possible to build an asset that both meets the community's requirements and the criteria for use of all the Section 106 funds within the quantum of those Section 106 funds. Therefore, it will be necessary for the Council to make a contribution to the cost of the project should Council wish to proceed. The current funding breakdown is clearly documented in the report being brought to you tonight. The provision of the community centre has been a long-standing commitment made to the community of Witham and links to the Council's Bouncing Back Together strategy for 2021 to 23. The options are documented in the report along with the recommendations in section 2. As I mentioned, I will hand over to Councillor Ritchie. I would also like to pay tribute to for his continued hard work and tenacity to get to this stage for a project that we will be able to be proud of, and one that the residents of Witham will be able to enjoy for many years to come. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Bowers.
Chairman, I think Councillor Ritchie, as supporting Cabinet member for this report, would like to say a few words as well.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good evening, members. As members will know, this report has been long awaited, and I'm pleased to be able to present it to Council this evening. As part of the original plans for the Maltings Lane housing development in Witham, we gave consideration as a Council to the impact of the scheme and the infrastructure needs it would generate. It was recognised that the development would create the scope for additional community infrastructure to meet the requirements of residents, and as a result, we secured land and a series of Section 106 requirements and funding contributions from a number of schemes that would support us build facilities that would meet the needs of the community. Some of these facilities have been built and are in use by the Witham residents now, including highways improvements, a new food store, children's nursery, outdoor sports facilities and football pitches. The report before you tonight is to provide one of the final elements of this package to create a newly built community facility which will provide a range of functions and services for the use of residents across Witham. There has been extensive research, evidence gathering and engagement across the community to design a building to meet their needs whilst aiming to be affordable. We have worked to identify community groups and organisations who would be interested in operating the facility to ensure that it is run by the people of Witham for the people of Witham, whilst this council retains ownership of the building and its long-term stewardship. Due to the number of Section 106 contributions sought and secured to help deliver the community centre, the timing of its development as a project has been very complex. Some funds we have had for a while, whilst others we are still to receive. It should also be noted that to build a scheme that would comply with Section 106 requirements while still meeting the needs of the community, there is a funding gap between the estimated cost of the scheme and the Section 106 contributions that have been secured, which needs to be funded to make this project deliverable. Given that the lifespan of this project has happened over a period of significant volatility and in build prices, impacted by global socio-economical factors and the pandemic, this has meant that the project has needed to be recosted several times. Indeed, we have sensibly made further provision in the drafting costings I bring before you tonight to help mitigate further potential cost increases. The need to redesign and recost this scheme has impacted on the timescales of its delivery. However, I believe this was the right thing to do to ensure we have a viable project to bring before full council. Whilst taking this project forward will involve a capital contribution from the Braintree District Council, and recognising that the council will not be gaining any significant ongoing revenue from the building created, I believe this investment into the community of Witham will provide an important asset that will improve community resilience, a dedicated community hub that will bring people together to improve cohesion, health and well-being, and also to provide much-needed changing rooms that will support the use of the football pitches that have already been provided. The next steps for the project will be to take forward final designs, secure planning permission, procurement, and an operating model to secure an anchor tenant to run the facility, which we will need to progress once we have commitment to add the project to the capital programme. However, we need to press on with this project swiftly to safeguard the Section 106 money secured to deliver the project and to mitigate the impacts of potential cost increases over the coming year, and most importantly of all, to deliver long-promised and much-anticipated community infrastructure to the residents of Witham. So this evening I'm asking you to approve the project and recommendation to add to the project to our capital programme with a total scheme cost capital budget of £4,039,733, recognising that this new community centre will be available to all the residents of Witham. I'm also asking you to recommend that the £200,000 Section 106 money secured from the Conrad Road development are allocated to the project to ensure those monies are spent on delivering an important community facility that can be used and enjoyed by all the residents of Witham. Thank you, Chairman, and I'll be happy to answer any comments from members.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Do any members wish to speak on this item? So please indicate by raising your hands. Thank you, members. Councillor Dervish, you'd like to go first.
Thank you, Chairman. I welcome the plans and proposals for the Maltings Lane Community Centre. This is very much needed for the local community and neighbouring wards. The plans incorporate an outstanding design in building, facilitating for all age groups and disabilities, something rather refreshing and desperately needed in Witham, which services a number of surrounding wards, including my ward of Hatfield, Pebble and Turling, and many others. This is something I am proud to be a part of on the steering group, along with fellow councillors, officers and local residents and groups. I would like to thank Councillor Ritchie and officers for their drive and exceptional hard work on this project. I am pleased and hopeful we can now move forward and get the job done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dervish. Councillor Everard.
Thank you, Chairman.
I wholeheartedly support this. It is for the community. Mind you, it's been a great number of years in the pipeline, but I was particularly heartened by the BDC and the officers' efforts in helping to find pushing this project, but helping to find more extra funding elsewhere. And of course, particularly that we are using the designated 106 money. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Horner.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. Just to say that a lot of people worked very hard behind the scenes to get this project underway, and it's to be admired how hard they've worked, and we hope they get success. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Horner. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, sorry, Mr. Chairman. Almost.
I'm noting them, don't worry. I'm noting them. Chairman Sarrett is going to be very rich this year.
Yes. I'll be supporting this, but I'm going to reiterate the comments I've made previously about the Council's priorities in the northern half of Witham and the villages to the north. From my knowledge, two of the substantial Section 106 monies that are going to this project, one from the Conrad Road development, which is the most, pretty much I believe, the most northerly point in Witham being built out now, and the Forest Road, was it Phase 2, which used to be in Rivenhall Parish, which is now in Witham, again, very northerly in Witham North Ward. And in the report it says, well, no projects were identified in Witham North Ward which could have benefited from that Section 106 money. Well, that's true as it stands, but that's because the council didn't identify potential projects. The opportunities were not taken on the Bellway developments for the council to work with the developers to identify a community project. The council demolished its former community building in Forest Road and never replaced it. So whilst I fully support this, and the southern part of Witham is expanding very rapidly, I think it's something like 2,000 houses in total, there's clearly a need for it. I would urge again that in future we look more carefully about how we divvy up the Section 106 monies, whether we should be talking more to our county and district members ahead of making any decisions like this, so that we get what I would regard as an equitable position. The north of Witham has no substantial community building. It's got the pavilion at Rickstones, but no substantial community. It's got no GP. It remains the largest ward in Witham in terms of population. So I would just urge that we look again at that. And also the final point I would make is this is being described as a community centre for Witham. We already have a community centre in Witham at Spring Lodge, which is owned by, no one's even mentioned that tonight, which is owned by BDC and run by a third entity. So I think there's more I'm going to support this, but I think there are wider issues here which we need to look at the next time we make a decision like this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. Councillor Corsina.
Thank you. I am delighted that the business case has come to full council following the agreement at Cabinet. As a ward member and a ward resident of Witham South, I know this is something that has been a priority for a long time. I'm particularly delighted that over £2 million of capital has been allocated by BDC and complemented by the proceeds of the Section 106 commitment. And it's good to see the benefits of the developments are being felt by constituents in Witham. Particularly as the community grows in Maltons Lane, with new properties, new residents, I think this new facility will provide the environment to build a new community, bonding, and enhance the opportunity for people to meet each other after the pandemic and the current inflation. This will be a community facility for the whole town of Witham, north, south, east, and west. And it is great that the community will be instrumental in running the centre. Further, with other investment proposed for the town, this is great to see that Witham is getting the investment to support our post-pandemic social and economic recovery. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Corsina. Any other members? No? Councillor Butland, as you seconded the recommendations and reserved your right to speak and have not yet spoken in the debate, please can I invite you to speak now?
Thank you, Chairman. They say some things take a long time in the gestation period, and this certainly has been one of them, and I agree with what Councillor Everard has said, but at long last we are there. I take the point which Councillor Abbott makes about the Section 106, and he's been consistent in that. I think it actually raises a greater debate about Section 106s and how it's done, and that may be something which, of course, will come out of government thinking about the planning system. Where I think we can be proud as a council is that 2.2 million of this is coming from the unallocated new homes bonus. And that was this council collectively taking a decision that we would not incorporate the new homes bonuses into our general reserves in an attempt to artificially keep down council tax rises, etc. We always said that we would keep that money for development of infrastructure so that people could at least see some reward for housing development, which maybe some of them weren't so keen on, but could actually see that reward. And this, I think, this 2.2 million is one of the reasons, a significant reason, why we've been able to take this forward. I'm delighted that with the work that Councillor Ritchie's been doing with the local community on how that might develop and the operating model, etc. And I have a great pleasure in seconding the proposal, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Button. Councillor Bowers and Councillor Ritchie, I guess it would be a double act if you're happy to answer questions. As the proposer of the recommendations, would you like to reply to the speeches? But please do not introduce any new matters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not much more to add. Just thanks to Councillor Davis and Councillor Horner for their participation on the Maltings Zane steering group. Their assistance and guidance was invaluable, as indeed was that of Councillor Davis's two teenage daughters, who gave some valuable input that sometimes us adults miss or gloss over. So thank you, Councillor Dervish. Councillor Everard, absolutely agree with the point that you made about finally delivering a community building. We're hoping this could be a blueprint for other ventures across the district. Councillor Pell, I can see your eyes peering at me as I'm talking about this now. So there's an acknowledgement that we can deliver a community-led initiative in Housestead too. And finally, Councillor Abbott, I know you mentioned about the Conrad Road issue. We would indeed throw our support behind any kind of land identified or venture identified in the north of the district, the north of Witham as well. And thank you, Councillor Corsina. It will be a fabulous facility for everyone in Witham. I'll hand over to Councillor Bowers.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Nothing more for me to add, just to encourage members to support this significant investment in Witham before us tonight. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you both. And thank you, members. The recommendations set out on page 57 of the agenda have been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please indicate. Thank you, members. Once again, that is unanimous. So the recommendations have been approved, and we'll now proceed to agenda item number 12, which is Cabinet's report to full council. And before opening this item, I'll remind members that they may put up to 2 questions to the Cabinet, which will be responded to by the leader or relevant Cabinet member. Councillor Abbott, as the leader of the opposition, may put up to 4 questions to the Cabinet. Members may not ask supplementary questions, and questions should relate to the functions of the leader or a Cabinet member, the powers and the duties of the council, or matters pertaining to the district. No statements may be made by councillors during this session. Where a response cannot be given during this meeting, a written answer will be issued within 10 working days of the meeting and circulated to all members. And as it's not yet reached 9:15, it means you have the full hour allocated for this item. So I'd be grateful for members' cooperation in being as concise as possible during this item, and I now invite Councillor Butland, as Leader of the Council, to introduce the Cabinet's report. Councillor Butland.
Thank you, Chairman. I formally introduce the report of Cabinet to full Council. In the unavoidable absence of Councillor Councillor Mrs Schmidt, Councillor McKee will cover those aspects, and in the, again, unavoidable absence of Councillor Mrs Spray, I will cover her portfolio. In the event that neither of us are up to the same standard as Councillors Mrs Schmidt and Mrs Spray, we may need to give written answers if we're not able to deal with it this evening. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Butland. Do members have any questions for Councillor Butland or any other member of the Cabinet? If you wish to speak, please indicate. Councillor Mrs Scattergood.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. My question really is for Councillor Mrs Smith, so I will direct it to Councillor McKee. The single cut verge policy is not working in the north of the district. Could the portfolio holder consider having all the junctions cut for safety reasons? The process at the moment is that we have to report those that require cutting. A member of staff has to visit, and then he or she agrees if there's a need to cut them and authorise the cut. This can take several weeks, and it really cannot be cost effective. Surely it would be safer to cut all the verges, all the junctions at once. We are now living in a very dangerous part of the world. The single track roads in my ward are also very dangerous, causing many, many complaints from residents, horse riders, cyclists, walkers and all users of the roads. Is there any possibility that the single track roads could also be cut, especially those with the deep, deep valleys, where the grass is now causing beepers on the side of your car to beep for the whole journey? The junctions onto the main roads are especially dangerous. To exit onto the A131 this evening, I had to open my car window and listen for traffic, which is fine if it's not an electric car coming. So I do implore, please, for the safety of our residents, can something be done about this? Thank you.
Councillor McGee.
Thank you, Councillor Scattergood. I understand the concern. This has been looked at several times, actually. And I won't make an agreement on behalf of Councillor Smith. What I will do is I'll take it away and speak to her about it, but I suspect what she'll say is that what's good for the environment, and this is an environmental issue, is not to cut verges. It's part of our rural community. Only cut them where parish councils request those on safety grounds. Now, I've just heard you say there's a lot of safety grounds that have been ignored. Well, I'll take it away and come back with a written answer from Councillor Schmidt.
Thank you, Councillor McKee. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. First question is to Councillor Butland as Leader of the Council, but also in his role as a ward member. He will be aware that there are reports that Park at Great Notley is at risk of collapse. Residents I represent who have in the past or currently have families who benefited from Park are very concerned about that. Is there anything the District Council can do?
Thank you, Chairman. And Councillor Abbott will also be aware, clearly I've got residents who also use that facility. My understanding is that Park, a few days ago, approached the County Council, indicating that they had significant problems so significant, those problems, that they have gone into administration with debts, I understand, of at least 6 figures. I think it unlikely that park itself, as a charity, will be able to be resurrected. It's not to say it won't be, but I think it unlikely. However, the County Council is engaged in looking at alternative provision for the services which park provide. It is a County Council matter. Our involvement, clearly we have an interest in the premises, but the services are partly commissioned by the County Council. I think it came as a complete surprise to everyone that suddenly, out of the blue, staff were told that they would not be required this weekend just gone to provide services, and that they would not be required the rest. I think there is an issue there which the trustees of the charity will need to debate. But in the specific question, is there anything that this council can do to help park? I think the fact that they have gone into administration, the answer to that is no. Is there anything that can be done to assist the families that use the services? Then I know, because I spoke on Friday evening with Councillor Beverly Egan, who's the County Council member for Children's Services, and I believe she was also on BBC Essex this morning. The County Council is well aware of the need to ensure that those services are provided. But I also fully understand the concerns and that this gives to families who have relied upon that service.
I've got 4 questions. So I think this goes to Councillor McKee for commencement. 2 questions. The first one, subject to the safety issues at junctions, as previously been mentioned, very much welcome the Verges policy extension for 3 years, and also the enhancement invitation to parishes, which is something I've been asking about. So parishes are being asked now, are there areas they'd like to enhance further with seeding? So does the Cabinet member agree that our rural verges could actually become important habitats, sort of linear habitats, free from agricultural spraying, where we can encourage wildflowers, not just that it looks good, but also that it has significant ecological benefits, including bringing back rarer wildflower species?
Councillor McKee?
I think I'm able to answer that as though I were Councillor Schmidt, because I know exactly how she feels about grass verges not being cut and being planted with wildflowers, and therefore they are an important part of our ecological habitat. So I suspect she would in fact agree with you entirely, and I'll allow her to come back if you didn't, but I'm sure she would accept that as a true statement of her position.
Second question by Councillor McKee, which would have gone to Councillor Smith. I very much welcome in her report details on what the Council's doing on climate change and energy efficiency. Would Councillor Schmidt have agreed that local MPs should respond to my letter, written as leader of the opposition of the Council a month ago, in asking for the government to consider giving local authorities the ability to improve green energy generation, including solar panels on new buildings in Braintree District? The reason I asked them that is it's a constant frustration raised at Planning Committee that we don't have the powers. We basically rely on the goodwill of developers to install green energy on developers. Would the Cabinet member agree that at least they should reply to whether the government's going to look at giving those powers to local authorities?
In this case, I won't answer on behalf of Councillor Smith, because I'm not sure she is aware of any letter that's gone to the Leader of the Opposition. So can I give you a written answer to that when I have a chance to, well, someone has a chance to speak to Councillor Schmidt? As you know, she's in recovery from an operation, so she's not here hiding, she's here not well. But we'll get an answer to that in a written reply. Thank you.
And my final question, so I think this goes back to Councillor Butland standing in for Councillor Spray. It's a bit like musical chairs, isn't it? On this side, we very much welcome progress on adoption of the Section 2 local plan. But would Councillor Butland agree that going forwards, that all of us, all groups at Braintree, should work on the principle of planning for the future by consent and not trying to lead communities to a position they're not happy with on the local planning? Thank you.
It's an interesting question as to how you determine consent. For example, on our local plan, there was no public referendum. It was an unelected planning inspector that actually made the decision. But I think the overall thing about taking the public with us as far as possible is something which would be difficult to argue against. The problem is that sometimes, not always, but sometimes, the view of the public is somewhat limited by how close they are to any development. So it is difficult. But the common intent of trying to take the public as far as possible, I think, is good. I think there will be objections to some of the sites that we have in Section 2 of our plan, which was passed not quite unanimously by this council. There was one Conservative member who opposed it and Councillor Abbott who abstained. But otherwise, Section 2 was unanimous. I can think of at least 2 sites, one of which will be in my ward, where there is likely to be significant opposition to that. So it is difficult about what we mean by consent. And I think there is something that we are elected to do a job of work, and that is to use our best endeavours. So, yes, in general, we wouldn't want to fly in the face of public opinion, but on the other hand, we have now got a clear policy, which I hope we will keep to in terms of the planning applications which may be in the pipeline.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. That concludes all of Councillor Abbott's questions, so we'll move on to Councillor Mrs Sandham.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. It's a question on planning enforcement, so for Councillor Butland in the absence of Councillor Spray. So it's unfortunately the case that those wishing to carry out unauthorised work sometimes do so at weekends or bank holidays in the hope that they will get away with it. Examples are working on contaminated land before taking remedial action or unauthorised felling of trees subject to protection, and cases of both have occurred in the south of the district this year. What should residents and councillors do in such circumstances to report these when the BDC offices are closed at weekends or bank holidays?
Someone needs to turn the microphone off.
I seem to have 2 green. I've got a red light now. I need a red light. That's it. Through you, Chairman, thank you for that question. And it's a very good question, because if we haven't got access over the weekend, sometimes it can be too late if you have to wait to Monday. I don't specifically have an answer to that, because I'm not close enough to the operational side of that, but I will, through you, Chairman, I will draw that to the attention of Councillor Mrs Spray and ask if she will give consideration together with officers as to how we might be able to deal with that. Okay?
Thank you, Councillor Butland. Councillor Walsh.
Thank you very much, Mr Chairman. My question is also on enforcement, and it's also to Councillor Butland standing in for Gabrielle Spray. And possibly this is an issue that's come up with other ward members. In fact, just last week I had 2 quite sensitive cases which I've already written to a senior member of the planning staff about. But putting it in context, following the constructive and inclusive member working group report and the agreement of this council to significantly invest, as we know, in upgrading the planning enforcement service, may I please ask for a progress report? It's one question in 2 parts. And then finally, many members continue to experience frustration in trying to get enforcement cases satisfactorily resolved. and we still do not seem to have the agreed quarterly reports. I wonder if there's any update on when we're going to get those, and any overall progress report on enforcement. Thank you.
I will, through you, Chairman, I will ask Councillor Gabrielle Spray to provide that information for you as soon as she is back. Clearly, we have put additional resources there, but we know there was quite a lot in the pipeline, and we will need to deal with the most serious ones first. We've had two very successful High Court issues. They of themselves, of course, do take a lot of time and effort in briefing barristers, etc. We have a couple of more that are likely to go down that line. But certainly, I do recall that Councillor Mrs. Spray did say we would have reports, and I will ensure that that is done.
Does that both answer your questions? Yes, thank you. Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Pell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask Councillor McKee, standing in for Councillor Mrs. Smith, regarding the skate park at Ramsey Road. The half-pipe ramp needs removing. Now, there's been a scheme for that site for years. There has even been consultation with the neighbours and interested parties, but still nothing's come from it, yet there's money set aside through 106 to get on with that. Now, that skate park will give things for the youth to do that don't fit into all the other youth facilities, that they can just go there, let off steam, get the energy out of them. It needs doing. We can't keep putting it off. So I'd be very grateful if that could proceed. Thank you.
I'm only aware of the work to, actually it's beyond repair, I understand, is the half pipe, because it's gone rusty, and I've seen photographs of it actually, so I know it's the situation. I'm not aware whether Councillor Schmidt has or has not got a plan right now to refurbish it. What I will do is I'll promise to get you a written reply with what the plans are to spend some of or all of the £250,000. Yeah, I'm sure there was. I'm just not I could lie to you, but I'm not aware of it. So as soon as Councillor Schmidt's back, I'm sure you'll get a written reply to that question. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McKee. Councillor Wright.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I have two questions. Do you want me to do them one at a time?
One question, one answer, and then go into your second. Thank you.
Is this for Councillor Schmidt or Councillor McKee? I welcome the Cabinet report detailing the A12 working group to tackle litter, which follows on from a call as a local ward member to find ways of reducing the appalling levels of litter along the A12. But does the Cabinet member really think that if the responsibility was passed back to National Highways, that the situation would improve, given that National Highways failed to routinely manage the cycleways along the A12, failed to properly repair potholes, and have left street lights on during the daytime for several years? All these issues repeatedly reported to them.
It's my understanding that the operations have been in negotiations, significant negotiations, to have a service level agreement with highways. However, I will again get a written reply to your question from Councillor Schmidt. It is something that it will be more suitably handled, but for the reason of closing traffic and getting the A12 cleaned properly, Highways England, or National Highways as they're now called, would be a better agency to do that, but it requires them to have an SLA that we will be happy with, and that, I think, is that conversation is going on, but I'll get you a written reply.
Thank you.
Your second question.
Second question is for Councillor Ricky. The Cabinet members' report lists some excellent local events held for the Jubilee. In the Silver End Crescent Ward, myself and Councillor Abbott attended 4 events, one of which we helped to organise, namely the planting of the Jubilee Oak Tree on Rivenall Parish Council, which BDC Commons reported on with a picture taken on the day of the local residents attending to help plant the tree. Can the Cabinet member explain why BDC has asked for several £100s for the licence to plant our Jubilee Oak Tree, and has the council charged other towns and villages for doing the similar?
So with reference to the licence to planting the tree, I can actually confirm that Great Notley Parish Council had to pay a similar fee, not just for one tree, but for 3 trees that we proposed to plant within Great Notley Village. So I think they're the standard charges that we apply for licensing of planting of a tree. So it's not been levied upon you to kind of point you out, but I believe that's the going rate for planting a tree. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Councillor Beavis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question, I think, is to Councillor Tattersley. Under the banner of Live Well, childhood obesity is rising again in the UK. And a few years ago now, under the banner of Live Well, we had Live Well Braintree District, so Live Well Child, to help to identify and resolve childhood obesity. I just wonder whether we could have, or I'm happy to have a written response from Councillor Tattersley on an update on Live Well Child Braintree. And also it would be helpful to have a bit more of an update generally on Live Well and public health in the Braintree District. Happy for a written response. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Tattersley.
Yes, thank you for that. Thank you for that question. I agree with you about the childhood obesity. It has slipped a little bit following the pandemic, and we are aware that we need to be getting it back on the curriculum at schools, which is very tight at the moment, simply because people have not been catching up on the normal work. But there is some work going off about Live Well, and I will provide, probably through my council report to council, the progress on that one. And we can do a briefing note generally about Live Well. There is an awful lot going off actually about Live Well, and in my report this time I've actually highlighted some of the clinical health issues which I think are interesting an awful lot of people. We're doing some work with the PCN networks on how we can start to resolve the problems that we've got with doctors, and we've had some workshops with doctors, and it's been interesting to see their side of the issue about why they're not prepared to move into new buildings and why they're unable to attract new doctors. That's been fascinating, annoying, I have to say, but quite fascinating in its own way. We wanted to do some work as well on whether the council can help the problems with people in hospital who can't get back into their own homes, and that's been half the problem with the ambulances, who are actually waiting to drop people off, but they can't drop people off because they've not got beds in there. So there is an awful lot of work going off. One of the things I think that we're most proud of at the moment is the work that we're doing with to support those people living with dementia. And I've mentioned specifically the one at the town hall with the dementia. The museum in partnership with Saffron Hall, where people have been in sound sessions, and it sounds quite different, but they are so good. Where people living with dementia and their supporters about singing and dancing and generally getting together. The only sad thing is, if I might say it, and it's not political, not too much political, is that we've had to cancel the dementia-friendly music train tomorrow because of the strike, and we're aiming to hold that same session in the town hall. So I agree with you. We can do some work on Live Well and try and brief members about where we are generally with all that.
Thank you, Councillor Tattersley. Councillor Santamaro.
Well, thank you, Chairman. Again, this one's for Councillor McKee in absence of Councillor Schmidt, please. And turning back to the rural verge cutting, we had an awful lot of, I suppose, near misses. We had residents that weren't happy about some of the verges not having been cut last year. Just the dangers of people being forced off pavements into the road, and unfortunately some of the rural roads are quite quick. Is it possible that we can signpost which verges are dangerous in our particular patches for them to be maintained more so than others? And will there be a possibility perhaps for members of the public to report areas that they would like to just be kept back for safety reasons rather than us having to report on an ad hoc basis? Because as Councillor Scarsgood noted, it's not always quick to get a response or action once something has happened. Thank you.
Councillor McKay.
On the members of the public, I think that's probably the answer to that will be no. But you as a ward councillor can quite happily spot in your ward where you think it needs cutting. That is the role of a ward councillor. And if you think there's a dangerous area and you alert the either through Wendy Schmidt or direct to operations, they will in fact go out and inspect it and then remediate. It doesn't have to be programmed. It has to be spotted by. I mean, typically people talk about the parish council because that's where most of the rural verges are. But there's no reason. I mean, I've got involved in a verge issue in my ward. I'm not rural. It's urban. You can do the same thing. So I suspect that's what Wendy Schmidt's answer would be to you, but I'll get you a written reply to make sure that is confirmed.
Thank you, Councillor McKee. Any other members have any other questions? Councillor Snappergood.
Are we allowed 2 questions?
You are, yes.
Thank you, Chairman. Can Councillor McKee therefore explain to me how I can inform the officers where the problem is when most of the rural roads are unnamed?
The simple answer to that is no, I can't. You asked me a simple question. No, I can't answer that, but I'm sure somebody else can. And Councillor Schmidt, I'm sure, will answer it for you.
Can I just say, we will look into that, but I do think the 3 words system identifies anywhere in the country. Now, whether our system enables 3 words, I don't know, but we will look into that. Okay?
That's a good suggestion for an add-on, as many of the emergency services are already using it. If there are no more questions, we come quite early for quite a while to the close of the meeting. So, members, as there are no further business items on the agenda, this concludes our business. Members, please, and we'll get this done quicker so you can get out. I know you're very keen. You've not been around for a long time. But there are no further business items on the agenda, so this concludes our business for this meeting of full council. Before closing this meeting, please can I remind members that the next meeting of full council will be held on the 25th of July, so that one will come round quite quickly. The webcast of this meeting will be published on the council's YouTube channel as soon as possible. Members, if you have any feedback following this evening's meeting, please can you provide this directly to either Emma Wisby or Kim Cole, who can consider it for future council meetings. So thank you, members, for your attendance and participation this evening, and to those watching on the council's YouTube channel. And being in Pride Month, Councillor McKee has been Councillor Mrs Schmidt, Councillor Buckland has been Councillor Mrs Spray, I have been Madam Chairman, but I am very proud of this council and thank you for being so cooperative in making my job easier. And as Mr Chairman, I close this meeting of full council at 9:37. Just.